Okay, hi. So I've decided to try uploading a video, and it's super out of my comfort zone, and I'm not very articulate, and it's gonna be embarrassing, so just bear with me. And if you get secondhand embarrassment from watching this, then I am totally right there with you. And don't worry, I'm embarrassed too. So I am going to focus on option three, the entire theory of forms. Um, so, what do you think of this way of understanding reality? My first impression is that I really like it because it kind of speaks to this idea that none of us agree 100%, or most of us do not agree 100% on ideas like wisdom, justice, courage, beauty. Like if you ask two people, if you pick two people and you're like, how do you define these things? More often than not, all of those like couples like would have different answers. I'm not sure that you could find two people on this earth that would have the exact same understanding, the exact same answer to like what is justice or what is courage. And I think that saying, okay, everyone has different ideas, but there is one universal. Like there is a perfect definition of this and we just haven't found it yet. I think that that makes a lot of sense to me. And so when the next question says like, do you think that there is something to this idea that everything has an ideal form of itself? Like, yes. I think that there is something to that idea. But I struggle with it because like the formula for getting there seems so hard. It seems so next to impossible that it is hard for me to comprehend that the good or intelligence or like a pure idea would ever be found. Like Plato, for the allegory of the cave, right? The guy, he gets released from his chains. He like crawls into the light. He's rebirthed, and he like is so confused, so disoriented. He immediately tries to run back down, at least from what I can understand, and then people like drag him back up, and then he like readjusts, and he sees the sun and like reality, not just shadows anymore, and there it is. Like he has it. He has knowledge at that point. And like he's done it. And I really wish that could happen. That could happen for us. But that's the problem with metaphors, right? Is there isn't like a gaggle of people who are gonna break into my apartment one day and like carry me off into the land of knowledge. Or they're not gonna do that for Trump, like our leader. So it doesn't work like that, right? Like it's such a fun metaphor because it's so easy, like in a way. Like it was really hard for that guy at first, but then he got it. Like now it's like riding a bike. Like he has it, he has knowledge, and he's never going to forget it. And it's not like that. It would never be like that. So the allegory of the cave, super cool, except that it kind of like, it's like mystical in that in real life, it could never be that easy. And so like it's the same with theory of forms, right? There isn't as easy of a formula, like you don't have to crawl up a hill. Instead, you have to have these super long, super in-depth conversations with philosophers, like Socratic discussion. What did we like dialectic? Is that what we called it? Like you have to talk to people. You have to have your hypothesis and your anti-hypothesis. Find a synthesis. Your synthesis becomes your new hypothesis, and then you like go through the gamut again. right? So, and then finally, after all those discussions, you get to a pure idea. That's kind of like how I understood it to work in Plato's mind. And okay, like that's not as easy as crawling up a hill, but it's still next to impossible. And here's why. Because the next question is, do you think that there are universally valid ways of defining concepts like justice or courage? And my answer to that is we would not be able to get there. It would be next to impossible for us to get there. Because if the way to get there is through these conversations, then all of the different people on this globe, all of the different cultures, all of the different perspectives, all of the different identities would have to be a part of that conversation, which is millions and billions of people. And even if you were to say, okay, let's talk to representatives of all of those different people, all of those different communities, we all know that picking one representative for an entire group, like that's tokenism, that can be like really damaging, and that can assume a lot of things. Not to mention that people don't fit into boxes or one community. Like we're all a part of like intertwined groups. We all like have multiple labels. And so like I'm gonna try to use a metaphor like Plato does. Like feminism is an example. Like feminism is not simple at all. To say that feminism, like every feminist has this equalizing platform of like, I'm a woman, it doesn't work. Because men can be feminists as well. And then there's more to that, right? Like in Western society, the goals of feminism are super different than the goals of feminism in other parts of the globe. And for like a white woman in the United States to say like we've achieved equality when women of color are still getting paid 60, 50 cents on the dollar to the man. Equality for who? For white women? You know? And then is the goal for equal pay in other parts of the globe? Not necessarily. Like there are super different goals of feminism across the entire globe. And so even though there's this one movement and it seems pretty simple, equal rights regardless of sex, even that definition is not universal at all. And I'm not a philosopher. And I've had conversations about this with a lot of people, but I am nowhere near the true idea, the pure idea of what feminism is, right? Because I have not had conversations with everyone, right? Or with all of these different identities. And so I think that's like the argument I'm trying to make, is that as Dr. Hausdorfer said in his little video on this discussion page, it was like, okay, at the very end, he was like, it has to be above cultural interpretation. And I think it can be really dangerous to just set down a definition and say this works for all cultures. Because we're so imperfect that we would never be able to do that. How could we say that we found the answer that would apply so universally that every culture would be able to identify with it? And that's not even to say like just on the Earth, right? Um, what about other planets? What about the like other beings in the universe? Like we have literally no idea what's out there. We don't even know what we don't know with respect to the cosmos. And so for human beings like on Earth to say like, yep, ideal form, we got it. I don't think we could do it at all. I think if we said we found it, we would be totally kidding ourselves. And that's kind of what Socrates says in like the Apology. He's like, I'm not wise, but I am wiser than most because I know that I don't know everything. And it's not my impression that like Plato or Socrates or Aristotle were like, yeah, like we found knowledge, we know the answer. Except in Wikipedia, it kind of made it sound like Plato thought like good is one, which I like have no idea. I found that hard to understand, and I'm sure that was like his best guess, right? At the world of forms, he found it, the good, but from my understanding, they never purported to say like, yes, we got it, like we know the answer, because they, they're more humble than that, which is dope. But even if Plato had been like, I got it, like think about what perspective he was coming from. Like he's talking to mostly white young people in a democratic society in ancient Greece. Like in one part of the world, one time period, a mostly like super small class, like certain type of person through these discussions, like that, if he said like I found it, I found the good, the form, like the one high form, it would have been like the one form for that group of people for like ancient Greece, maybe. It it would not have been universal because it wouldn't have taken into account everyone else. So maybe to recap or summarize, what do you think of this way of understanding reality? I think it's super interesting, and I think it has a lot of value. Do you think there is something to this idea that everything has an ideal form of itself? I think there is something to that idea. I don't I think there is something to that idea. But do you think there are universally valid ways of defining concepts like justice or courage? Not yet, in even the slightest. And probably not ever. I think the best we can do right now is to find mutual understanding. Because we don't even know what each other think yet. So, before we even think about finding a universal definition or intelligence or pure idea, we have to at least, dare I say, find out everyone's opinions and everyone's experiences, because to some extent, experience is a belief, right? I mean, we're at least at sea. So, okay. Thank you for listening and watching. Goodbye.